Hello and welcome. Between bombs, bullets and ballots, what's in store for Afghanistan? Next week, the country holds its first election in 5 years. But will the vote bring stability to the country? There are 40 candidates vying for president. Incumbent Hamid Karzai was the darling of the Bush administration. But 8 years later, for most Afghans, life has changed for the worse. Karzai's government does not have much control outside Kabul and is blamed for corruption and the poor security situation. US military commanders say the Taliban is growing stronger all the time. The Obama administration continues to beef up its presence, and a record 68,000 troops are expected to be in Afghanistan by year's end, even as casualties among American forces grows. So today we ask the question, is the Obama administration strategy in Afghanistan working, and can the upcoming elections help bring stability to this war-torn country? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room, and then take part. We, of course, also welcome your phone calls on this show. Joining me are Michael Semple, the former deputy to the European Union Special Representative for Afghanistan. He joins us from Islamabad, Pakistan, where he previously worked as an advisor to the British High Commission. Mr. Semple was arrested and kicked out of Afghanistan by the Karzai administration in 2007 for his work in trying to bring Taliban fighters into a reconciliation process. And with me here in Washington is Wahid Fakiri, an Afghan journalist who writes for a number of Afghan online news magazines. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fakiri, let me start with you here in the studio. The front page headline in the Wall Street Journal says, Taliban now winning. The top US commander in Afghanistan says the Taliban have gained the upper hand, forcing the United States to change its strategy.
Mm-hmm. Well, they are, to some extent, they are controlling more land than the government itself. They are getting momentum. They are facing a government which is weak and corrupt, and they are they are facing an opponent which is not producing anything for the populations. They are losing the heart and mind of the population. So therefore, if you see it that way, yes, the Taliban are moving ahead. They are getting stronger. They are getting the support from Pakistan and other tribal areas, and of course from the Gulf regions also. They have some economic and financial supports from that area too.
Let me ask you something about the Taliban. When we talk about the Taliban, are we looking at a monolithic organization that owes its allegiance to one leader, or are these disparate groups that actually owe their allegiance and support just to basically tribal chiefs around the country?
Your second guess is much better. I mean, it is not a monolithic movement. It never has been. It is a very there are separate commanders in the region. There are separate individuals who run the different groups, armed groups in Afghanistan, and Taliban themselves are not unified. There are the southern Kandahari type Talibans, the eastern Talibans, Mujahideen, the previous Mujahideen like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, like Haqqani, other groups that are other criminals and drug lords that have armed groups fighting the government, protecting their turfs. So there are many groups fighting under the name of Taliban, or we, for more try to make it simple, we call them Taliban. There are a lot of groups who are active in Afghanistan.
Okay, let's go to Michael Semple in Islamabad. Michael Semple, it would seem right now that the United States and its allies in NATO and others, to some extent, are looking at a military solution. I want to go to an email here that we received, and this was from Mohammed Umar, and he writes, changing the government will not impact what is going on. They just need to talk to the Taliban, whether moderate or extremist. Now, you were expelled from Afghanistan for doing just that.
It's ironic that I was expelled for doing something which now has been recognized by most mature, responsible observers as being the highest priority, what absolutely has to be done now.
Well, let me go to the opposing viewpoint here. This is another email that we received from Kuram Zaki. He has a different view here. He says, why negotiate with the Taliban? They don't rule the hearts and minds of ordinary Afghans. It's the gun-toting hands who rule there. It's better to empower the ordinary Afghan and leave the country ASAP as soon as possible. Afghanistan will decide for itself what it wants.
I think the answer to that is that the experience of the past 10 years has shown that the Afghan Taliban have become one part of a very complex society in politics in Afghanistan. They currently are part of the problem. Ultimately, they will be one part of the solution. The price of excluding them has been an indefinite continuation of the conflict.
How can they be brought into the negotiation process?
It's going to be quite a while before there is any serious kind of negotiation. I think that first of all there will have to be some kind of re-establishment of contacts and building of some kind of trust between the Afghan government, the newly elected Afghan government as it will be next month, and the Taliban. They probably will have some preliminary talks dragging on for quite a while before you get anything that looks like a negotiation.
Would one of the solutions be to talk to the different leaders around the country, the tribal leaders? Because as Wahid Fakiri told us earlier on, this is not one monolithic group. These are disparate groups that owe their allegiance to different leaders around the country. So approaching the leaders could be one solution. If you approach the leaders, make a deal with them, then you would have the support of that group of Taliban in that area.
When you listen to what the different presidential candidates have been saying, it is clear that whoever comes out on top of this election, whoever is the newly elected president, is going to be elected with a mandate to have a go at reconciliation. Anybody who has just got elected as president is going to be trying to keep on board the people who have voted for him, as well as making overtures to those people who've been outside the process. So I'm sure that they will both be trying to talk to the tribal elders, all those who they sort of think of the on-side constituencies, and they will be making their overtures to the Taliban.
Wahid Fakiri, one of the strategies that is being looked at by the United States is to now protect civilians from the Taliban. Civilian casualties have been going up. As I understand it, they went up by something like 24% just in the first 6 months of this year. Is that the correct way to go?
Yes, it is absolutely the most important concern of Afghans. There, as you mentioned, the bombing has been increased in the past year. There are a lot of casualties, civilian casualty. We have witnessed some massacres, not just in Farah, just a while ago in Farah, in Shindand, in other places, which caused extraordinary amount of resentments and opposition in Afghans, in the Afghan population, and it really made the distance between the government and the population much greater. And I think that's one issue that the Obama administration is trying to solve, and that's the reason that they are trying to limit their bombing. In the bombing, the one reason for the bombing was that there were not enough troops on the ground. So they relied heavily on bombing, and we also have to concern the issue of false informations, the feuds among different tribes, trying to manipulate American intelligence in order to defeat or hit their own opponents. That really brought a lot of resentment and tension in Afghanistan, and I think it must stop. We must do better to limit civilian casualties.
Michael Sample, that is one of the strategies that the United States is looking at to prevent more civilian casualties. Another one, and this was something that was leaked to a national newspaper here in the United States, and that is to draw up a target list, or a hit list, as they have called it, to target those who have, those leaders, those tribal leaders in Afghanistan who have close ties to the Taliban, either capture or kill them. Is a strategy like that going to work, or is it just going to alienate the Taliban and the rest of the Afghan people more?
I think the best way to end civilian casualties and to protect civilians will be to make progress on the reconciliation process. That's really when you're going to see the civilian casualties go down, where at the national level or even in parts of the country you actually get ceasefires coming into place. Anything you try to do is going to be a partial solution. The whole operation in Afghanistan over the past 8 years has been plagued by difficult intelligence, particularly a lot of intelligence which has been fed through into the system maliciously by people who are trying to trigger action against local rivals and basically get them shot or arrested. If we go down that slippery slope again, we'll make things worse rather than better. When you try to work out why people are fighting, why they've joined the insurgency, the story of many local insurgencies, of many groups of commanders who are now fighting, starts with somebody who has been targeted because of faulty intelligence, somebody who was prepared to live in peace in the country but has actually been driven up into the mountains. So in trying to protect civilians, the idea will be to get those people down from the mountains rather than to drive more people up there to join them.
Well, among all these strategies that are now being talked about here in the United States about how to approach this problem in Afghanistan, one is that there's now be a bigger concentration of military forces in Kandahar, in the Kandahar area, which the United States believes is the spiritual center for the Taliban. That is moving troops from Helmand province, where they are right now, to Kandahar. Do you agree with that assessment of the U.S. military commanders?
I'm not sure that that is really going to happen. I think that you will see troops being fanning out across many areas where they're sent to, but essentially that will be a holding operation. They want to show that they haven't given up. They want to try and shore up security temporarily so that progress can be made on building up the Afghan security forces, which there's a clear and announced commitment to. And I think that as we see the new Afghan president go to work, we'll find that the shoring up of the security is also creating space so that president can make progress on reconciliation.
Okay, we have lots more to talk about, but we have to take a break right now. More of our discussion in a moment, and as we pause, let me remind you that you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. We'll be right back.